Anaya na hip aya idat kita kat Johan. Atlen gunl cheesh yak ti. Kone aya kat kayboots at joy. Just yay kuwache ach shukwa yukatangi. Dehuch. Uh, Great to see everyone. So I think sending questions around the table and also just diving into things is getting us asking lots of questions, which is great because that means we're thinking about. I have a theory that if you just keep talking more, you'll find where all your gaps are, and they're always. It's like a really old house, like when we have an old house, and they set up a thing to like show you where the leaks are, and they're like, we can't even register anything, so because it's just a house full of leaks, and so. Uh, Welcome to the Kashawashi Hit, or I guess it'd be Kaudawashi Hit, the holy house, which I think when you say holy cow, it's not a cow that literally has holes, right? Or like, so you would say Shashtugu Hat would be the equivalent of holy crap, which would be like, it's holy as in like from the heavens or something, so pure. Uh, anyway, so we had some questions. I think talking about my water bottle, which hindicate would be the water bottle. And so ach hindicate. The question is, where does the relational suffix go? And hindicate is a compound noun, so it would go at the end, which would be on the decade, which we'll see with other things. Like so tus is its own noun. The nazi is now you get tustanazi. Anybody know what that is?
Thread wax.
Beeswax.
Red wax, beeswax. So, ach, well, that one has an I on the end, so I guess it's not a great example. But when you have things that are multiple nouns smushed together, they don't separate. Then the other question was, how do you say I had and I used to have? And achjiyewuti was I had, and achjiyewutiyin is I used to have. And there are, it's kind of up to you how you talk about people who have become ancestors, whether you say kagwantan husatiyin, or you could just say kagwantan husati. I think either one's fine. It just depends on they are now or they used to be but not anymore. I've heard that done both ways. So that's a sensitive thing. Then I think there were more questions. So let's go. Who's got a question?
Kataya,
Huh.
I don't know if this would be a good use of our time or not, but I've been thinking about the word jawu for to have. And I see that we're using it right now, ach, jiyewuti, and just sort of looking at it, again, if you think this is a good use of time, but jawu and its relation to achji and some of those tenses and verbs versus nouns, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a good point. So let's see. So I guess maybe we'll take a look at this. So this is every now, like advanced Lingit is fun because when we look back on things that we studied probably a while ago, but probably like they're so abstract until you start using them, I think. And so here is the relational noun G, which I would call a relational base, and that's just saying the relational part says it needs a noun before it. The base part means you can add a suffix if you want to, because not all relational nouns can take a suffix. So here you've got jidach or jeet, jide, jinach, jeet, jiwu, jich, jich. So as far as like being in the possession, so this is possessions, not in hand. It's not like it's sitting in the palm of your hand. You could say that differently. But like jidach, and simple ways to, and there's more. You say jiyis, so there's another one that's out there. It was thrown up here at the top. And so what would ji yis be?
For someone's benefit.
Yeah. So you could say whole statements without using any verbs. So if I handed you something and I could say, this is for you from my older brother. Right? So I'm telling you, this is for you to have, and I'm telling you who gave it to you. But it doesn't require a verb. Jidach and jid, that's usually used for like losing something, like it's going out of your hands. Jide, you're going to have it. Jinach, it's going through your possession. Jeet is the one we hear quite a bit in handling verbs. Ach jite, hand it to me, put it in my possession. Jiwu, so jiwu is used, it should be without a verb. So this is used in verbless phrases, just meaning it is at my possession, right? And so this one cannot really be used in any future or past tense kind of way. Then it's got to switch to a verb. And you can say G or you can say G, because this one is actually fine either way. And G is probably more common. Achjiyeti, right? Just like ituyeti. A similar type of thing goes on with t. And then G would be to repeatedly be in your possession or moving around in it. So then we did have a question. So like it would usually switch to G if it's if it's now attaching to a verb. And so here's one more. We gotta have one more. So there's for the benefit. What about jiqa?
It's enough for it?
Yes. So enough in possession. Right? So you're saying like I have enough. So for example, someone might say kawut itinechgeiti, kaikach chiqayati, which a true beater would probably never say. I could say.
You could say like, duacha chica, like they have enough food.
Yeah. You say du chiqayati wa atcha.
Oh.
And so sometimes it feels like it wants a verb and other times it doesn't. But to say like they have enough food, they have, this is enough. And there's different situations where that could come up as well. So if we're dividing stuff and you could say, ah, chiqayati, like I'm pleased with the amount that I have, is really what you're saying. Okay.
And that's sheesh. And so what's this? What part of speech is this called again?
So these I call them directional and relational terms. I call this particular thing a relational noun or a relational base. I like to say relational base just to say this one can take a suffix because others can't. Like nak. Nak cannot take a suffix. Like it can't. So jinach, you could use jinach to say like ach jinach shu ach danayi. Yeah, chatlakwe hundake hitide nagut chachyedi. The money just flows through my hands and ends because my kid keeps going shopping, right? They just go to the store all the time, or for whatever. But jinach usually implies that you're unable to hold on to it sometimes. Kind of depends on what you're talking about. A lot of these are used metaphorically, right? And as you analyze speeches, which we should pick some things from Hatu Nagu Yis to examine and look at this, because you can also do the same thing. I think if I go, which way do I go, up or down? So you can see it with tu. So, and when you look at that, so G is long and low, and sometimes it shortens, so G yes tends to shorten. But if you look at tu, which is inside, tuqa, to be pleased inside, that's where shtuqa khatati or achtuqayati comes from. You could also use this just, and it's not a verb, but you could say, Ach tuqa shawahik wikisha. Right? So if I said that, let me switch here. We got to come back before I forget. I think we started saying, Shayit, Chwaslayich, Yahuch. Oops. Dugu, team. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So if I said, Ach tuqa shawahik we isha. What am I saying there?
Well, you're grateful for your bucket.
Well, like, so shtuqa khattati is grateful, yes.
That your bucket's full.
But so, but that's like a whole verb phrase that gets put together, right? And it's, when you look at the whole thing, it is a little weird because it says, it seems like my own self sufficient or pleasant I am, right? So it really means like I'm pleased. I am pleased, and then just, but that's an instance where you don't look at the individual parts, you look at how the whole thing gets together. But if you say ach tuqa, so for example, if you say ach tuqa yati, which is actually this same verb, it's just this chush part that changes it to a plus D version. So this would be I am grateful. And usually you say it, something e day, like e day shtuqa khattati, I'm grateful towards you. I've heard people say dach though, but I think day is maybe the more common one. So ach tuqa yati is a little bit different. I am,
Pleased.
I would say satisfied, right? So then if you say, Ach tuqa shawahik wikisha, what does that say?
The bucket is full enough for me.
Yes, right? So there's different ways, like the literal interpretation would be like, I'm pleased with how, or I'm satisfied or pleased with how full the bucket is. But it's like, you could also say, I think the bucket's full enough. Or I'm happy with how full the bucket is. But what you see here is this is not two verbs linking together because this first part isn't even a verb, right? So you could say, there could be all kinds of situations like that, right? Like they say, do you want to add more to what they said? I might say, kaik achtuqa kun kanach akawanik. It was explained to people sufficiently.
The sentence Aktuga Shawachechwik Isha is something that I've been wondering about because in beginning Lingít it was drilled into us pretty hard about object subject verb for simple sentences. And obviously that is a different way. And so how to start becoming comfortable to break out of that template.
Yeah, because not everything in Lingít needs a verb to do it, right? Like, so I think we talked about, did we talk about this? Or was this last night? I think this was last. So I could say wasa itu wuch. There's no verb there. But what am I asking? You gotta know how to go verbless so you could just really talk without verbs. Even though we love verbs.
How are you feeling inside? How are you inside?
That's what it looks like, right? But there's a slightly different sort of interpretation, I feel, when this is used. Anybody else heard this?
What do you think?
Yeah. What how do you feel? Usually you're saying about it. Or what do you think about it, right? It's really interesting because it's a very shortcut way to, like, if we're the panel and people are asking us a question, and then I say, how do you say this? And I'll offer my thing, and I might look at you and say, wasa ituwuch, which is really saying, like, do you agree with that, or what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on it? How do you feel? So it's a very contextual type of thing, which I think as we use and get more and more and more, we find these things that like, because we do them in English all the time, right? Because we'll say, how about you? Right? Like if you just said that on your own and you just were teaching somebody English, you're like, what does that mean? Well, it depends on the context, right? How are you? I'm okay. How about you? Right? So it's usually bouncing a question back to you or something like that, which Lingít could do with wa'equa. Any question someone asks you, if you say wa'equa, you're saying the same thing back to them.
Why don't you say wasa ituwa?
Yeah, you could say wasa itu yeti. So like wasa itu yeti. You could say that.
And then in the phrases of encouragement, you have wasa ituati.
Wasa itu yeti. But these are more sort of saying like, how are you inside? And that's a very contextual thing as well. Because if I haven't seen you for a long time and I'm asking you that, then I might be just saying like, how are you? How are you feeling? You know, or if I know that you've gone through some recent struggles, wasa ituwiti? I'm asking about how you're handling those things. But it could if I was the store owner of a Tlingit store and you came in and said, wasa ituwiti? I might be asking you, what do you want? Because you could say yewech tuwiti. That's how I think about it, that's how I want it, that's how I feel.
In the notes for the phrases of encouragement under wasa ituati, one of the examples given is using it as response when there's a heavy topic and wanting to know what their thoughts is. Is the one for wasa ituuch a more casual one to use, like your example on a panel?
Yeah, it's a lot less, it's more like, what do you think about this thing we're talking about? You know,
Or like if we both ordered the same entree and Raven wanted to know what my thoughts were about the steak salad.
yeah, wasai tuch. It's just like, how do you feel about it? But yeah, it's kind of almost slangish, I think, in terms of how it's being used. And then wasashti denuk would be a little bit more, I think, an emotional emphasis. Like, how are you feeling inside? Right?
Which is interesting because in the beginning I think that's the name of the chapter where we're talking about all of our injuries.
Yeah.
Yanni.
Yeah, right. Which is, and it was interesting too because like when we're trying to like raise little kids in Lingit and they were falling down and getting hurt, because the playground was in the parking lot, they would say, "Iyak ege, iyak ege," and I said, well, I think we're asking the kids if they're good, right? Which would be maybe if I like walked in the room and my kid looked at me very suspiciously, they look very guilty. I might be saying, "You okay? Like, are you being good?" Whereas I think, "Hechke wasa iti" is, are you okay? Did you get hurt? And then this is another good one to just know. Hechke wasa uti and hechke wasa kwati. So how would I translate hechke wasa iti?
Are you okay?
Are you okay? What about hechke wasa uti?
Are you not okay?
There's no you there.
Is it a
Is
would-
it all right? Like, is it okay?
Mhm.
And then is it going to be okay? Oh, okay.
Would it be okay? Right? So these ones work really good to tie to other verbs, right? It's okay if I hechke wasa uti ikach, or I could say hechke wasa kwati shtakat ikachwe could say kokokotlugu. It's okay if I drink all your coffee?
Going back to Heshke Wasakwati, like Dahaja just said. So in Klika, would it be okay is asking permission for
Yes.
something. So this would be asking permission, not saying like, will everything be okay?
Yeah, like I was asked to do I guess I don't know what to call well, we asked for consent, to ask consent. Helke wasa uti gachtuhuli, right? Which is how you would, if you're just straight asking the question about, getting busy, but it doesn't, you could say, Helke wasa uti achande kwakuti. Would it be okay if I came by you? Right? And so usually I would think of this, like if I'm asking you, would it be okay if I did this thing right now? I would use this one and a future verb. And then if I'm going to say at some point, I would probably use a future verb, right? Would it be okay if I came to see you? Is it okay if I come to see you? Right? But Tlingit is always so mushy with time, I think. Heshke wasa uti iyuchatangi kakshahiti. Is it okay that I wrote down your words? So if you're using perfective for both, you're saying, is it okay that this happened? I think. Is it okay that it's going to happen? Would it be okay that it's going to happen? So, this says,
Lance,
uh,
how come that doesn't mean will it be okay?
I think it's fine either way.
Oh, so they both mean the same thing?
Yeah, I think, what's the difference in English? Is that saying the same thing?
Asking for permission versus asking if everything will be all right.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Fut-
like,
Future in English is something is going to happen, whereas the subjunctive is it might or might not.
how's that then? Will it be okay?
But that's not a phrase to use if somebody is like, I don't know, broke their wrist and is healing well. And you wouldn't ask them, Heshke Wasakwati, will it be okay?
You could.
You could. So
Yeah.
it could be both for asking if something about a person is going to be okay, but also asking permission to do something.
Yeah, because like if, let's say I go to the doctor. Doctor speaks Tlingit, gives me a very scary diagnosis. I could say, Heshke wasachatkukwati.
Gneshish. Will I be okay?
Will I be okay? Or would it be okay? Is it going to be okay? That could also like achus or whatever the thing is. Heshke wasakwati achus. Will my foot be okay?
Okay,
Same right here. But then you can just add the specifying noun at the end. Heshke wasakwati itla. Will your mom be okay?
so like, Heshke Wasa cops. Ooh, Kugati. Will the children be okay?
Yeah.
Or will that child be okay?
Yeah. But then we got to have context there too, because you're like, I don't know, it's like, we're talking about behavior stuff, we're talking about like just generally like kids can be okay. Because if you're talking about, you could also say, Gedane, ge, yik, wanneer, itchen. What does that ask?
go heel. And
Is it okay if I hold your hand? Would it be good?
There's a good in there, but there's no holding.
will your hand heal? Oh, good.
Yeah. Will your hand heal completely? Will your hand, and so I guess will your hand heal well is literally what it's saying. But I think if I was asking that, I'd be like, is it going to be back to normal? Is it going to be, what's the function, Look. And so you can ask those things as well. Okay, so Shayit Khwashayich Yacht Duguti. What does that translate to?
I made a hat of sea otter fur.
Hello.
Pillow.
Pillow. Yeah.
And probably of would work, but let's just say with, so that we're sticking with what we're seeing in the grammar. No big deal. So now I want to say,
Before we move on though, so that's following it for the grammar and just thinking kind of when we're constructing sentences or also working on translation work, either language, that could also work as a sentence for saying, I made a sea otter pillow. Right?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you could probably say Yacht Dugu Shayit Khwashayich.
Ah, nashish.
But you just got to be clear that people are going to understand that that's what a thing is.
Mhm.
So how would I say I made a jacket with moose-hide? Because I'm cool like that.
S'eek dugutin.
Khwashayich.
Na'at is clothing.
Inak at Atlayech Tisdugutin.
Yeah, oh what? So what we were talking about last night, which maybe in intermediate Tlingit, which maybe we as a group haven't talked enough about, is the concept of naq eqi in Tlingit grammar. And what are we talking about there?
Octopus fingers.
Yep. So the idea comes from the way they teach Hawaiian grammar, and they teach it in the Hawaiian language. And so maybe there'll come a time when we're talking about this all in Tlingit. But to say the tentacle would be the individual parts, because you could say kinek ati khoshayech ziskdugutin. You can also say ziskdugutin kinek at khoshayech. But those are the two parts. You can swap them, but you cannot mix them up. You cannot say zisk kinek at khoshayech dugutin. People would probably be able to figure out what you're saying, but it sounds awful. Sounds like you dropped the words on the floor and just picked them up in any old order. And so we're trying to identify these things because also the first thing you say is the most important thing. Like if it's really important that you made a jacket, that comes first. If it's really important that it's out of moose hide, that comes first. Any other questions? Good stuff.
I have one that got lost a little earlier when we were talking about handling things. I was just thinking in my head here about how to say take my hand, take my hand. Is that Akjin Ijit or something like that?
I'd probably use a verb. So I'd probably say Akchin Qasha, grab my hand. Again, it's a contextual thing because like are you, take my hand can be used in a lot of different contexts, right? So like we are also running into this with we're trying to figure out how to say fist bump. I haven't figured it out. So we're going to talk to some speakers. And so if you're working with any speakers, ask them how to say fist bump. See what they say. Because it's not, you're not really punching. I don't think the punching verb would be accurate. But I think Akjin got shot because Khatye said, well, here's the whole phrase. Lingít ani dléigu whoosh jin tilshat yes. Great phrase. What does it say?
Lingit ani is the world or earth.
I think, is this the one where he's saying, while we are here, we will hold each other's hands while we're on Earth?
Yeah, I mean that this maybe the first part of it isn't really on there, but holding each other's hands. What's the apostrophe go on each other's? After the R?
No,
After the S?
because there's multiple others.
You say each other's hands, or you just say each other's. This.
Just one.
So in that one is like on the world, or how, what is that?
Yeah, so you see there are different ways. So this is probably the most common way that I hear people talking about this Lingit ani ka. But I've also heard Lingit ani tiqwani. And then I've also, in this case, heard Lingit ani dléigu. How is that different?
On top of, inside of, and I'm not sure the third.
Yeah, so on top of. And then tiqwani would be people inside the world, which is, that's what it literally means. But we say, oh, now we've got we got hands together. I don't know. It's like in a Pepsi commercial or something. People all over the world join hands. Is it the love train? Is that what it is? Okay, anyways. What about the dléigu part?
In the folds of.
Yes. So in the folds of this one is really, so dléi is a pretty wild term, I think. Because dléi on its own is a bay, like on the ocean. So you'll see it sometimes a place name, so they'll talk about it. But it's usually like a big, wide open bay. But then you have some different things. So if you say jiqe, what is that?
Arm.
Or the
Arm.
Crook of the arm, because a jin is also a hand. I mean an arm.
Oh.
So this part is jintak. And then I don't, like if you were to.
Sounds like a little bay.
Oh, yeah. It's my little bay. Little boat leaves. Okay. So jiqe is the crook of the arm. And then there are times when you're going to use this. So I'm going to look this one up. I always forget this one. Okay. Anybody know this word? Anachen.
Fence.
It's a fence, yep. So what would anachen be?
corner of the fence?
Is it the
Yard?
Yes. So think of qay as like just sort of between something. I don't really know. It's such an interesting. Usually we translate it as between the folds of, because it's almost like the land has crinkled up and now you have this bay of water. But then you have this, but then it's because you fold it up and you get this crook right there.
Something that seems a little silly, but I remember being told this as a kid, like if we were allowed to watch a movie and eat popcorn in bed, not to get crumbs on the bed. So would that be the same kind of description of like in the sheets?
I like how you introduced this very
circle.
innocent introduction.
Bring it all back to, well, is it okay if I do that?
Yeah, I guess you could say, yeah, it's a yate. And so, but I'm think if someone translated that, be like, oh, I better not disturb them.
But it could be used for cloth, because I can see how that could be used in like sewing.
Yeah, yeah. Like so, if you want to just sort of push the edges up and then put something in that, talking about that space that's sort of created by that pushing, then yeah.
Kind of like pleating fabric or box pleats. You put the extra fabric in between the two folds.
What is this?
I'm curious about why in Lingít Ani there isn't a high tone over the I in Lingít.
Yeah. So also, why is there I can't tell you why there's an apostrophe, but I can tell you why there's an I. So when things, so for example, this is a good question. So this is different than this. How?
The Eagle's Water versus Eagle River.
Right? So when you make something into a compound, so this is Lingít compounding, what tends to happen is everything goes short and low except for the last thing, which they call the head word. And so because of that, Ling on, so it smushes. This one also does something a little interesting. It gets this apostrophe there, just to say that it's different than the land of the Tlingit peoples or the Tlingit villages. It's the world. But you'll see plenty of examples where this can, especially in place names, where this, and so this, and then you get over a lot of time, you tend to get some really strong contractions. Because what does this contract to as a place name?
Salmon River?
Okay, so
Dog
it's,
salmon?
okay, Dog Salmon River would be how it translates.
Tahini.
Oh, Takini.
So this is what it looks like. It goes flat, goes short. Titini. And then if you have the tithin e adi, you get Canadi.
Oh.
So in clan names, you also get a lot. So what happens in compounding is not always full. So we call this compounding to say things are going short and tend to go low. We call it contracting when things start changing their shape. Because teen adi becomes adi, like deshu hit tan becomes deshi tan, and whoosh kika hit tan becomes whooshki tan, and kawagani hit tan becomes kagwan tan. So that's contraction, which is related to compounding, but compounding is sort of the first step. Okay. Good questions.
Goodness.
So yeah, na kagwantan.
Kawagani hit tan.
Kawakani hitan.
Charred, the house got a little burned. What's their story to tell? Ishka hit tan, ishki tan. right? And so like most of those, we could pull them apart and see what's there. We don't always know exactly where some of those places were. We know for some of them. Okay, so I thought we're taking big steps and doing big things. But then sometimes we might want to step back and say, oh yeah, let's just walk through some stuff that's more familiar so we can familiarize ourselves with some things. Even things that we went over maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 years ago, just to see how well we understand them. As we're starting to learn more and more, we come back to these things that are familiar, and then sometimes this helps us to see what parts were we even moving way back then. So we might have done this before, but we might not have. I cannot remember anymore. I don't know why. So these are independent pronouns. So this should go fairly fast. I would like everybody, there's 20 of us. I don't really want to use the table thing because then I'd have to show 2 different things, and we'll take a break from the table on Wednesdays, just in case people are. So we'll just sort of popcorn it. But if you're answering a whole bunch, maybe just take a pause and let someone else answer. And if you haven't answered yet, get in there, give it a shot. Because if you get a little bit off, someone else probably knows it, right? So these are independent pronouns not attached to anything. Grammatically, they're just completely isolated. They're usually used in yadu, weidu, gusu, those types of verbless phrases, or to say aya. So you'd say something aya or something ku'a. For example, if we're at that table and someone's bringing us food, and they're like, dasai tuasuku yichai, gwash yao, gwash sak. And then I might say sakach tuasuku, blank ku'a, which is going to be one of these pronouns, but I'm not going to say it right now. Okay. How do I say me in this case? Yep. What's it going to look like when I spell?
Underline K,
Underline X?
X, I'm sorry, underline X, A, T.
How's that vowel going to be? Ooh,
Oh,
high
oh,
tone.
I,
So all of these ones, every single one of these is going to have a high tone. Bing, bing, bing. These orange ones, they like high tones. They are the only pronouns that have high tones, but they all have high tones. It's like you gotta have a high tone to be in this club.
So all independent pronouns have high tones.
Yes.
Okay.
Like you want to be in this club? You gotta have a high tone.
I always think of them when I try to spell it when it's not independent.
And then every other one doesn't. If it's attached to anything at all, it's gotta be low. What about us?
Wuhan.
Yeah. How's that gonna be spelled? What do you think?
UH high tone AAN.
That's about right. Wuhan. What about you?
What?
How do you spell that?
W-A stop high tone E.
There it is. What about y'all?
Yuan. And
Ah.
I don't understand the difference in pronunciation between Wuhan and Yuan.
How are we going to spell this? Then we'll talk about, because there's some variation with all of this stuff.
YEEHAAN. YEEWHAAN. With the accent, with the high tone on the second syllable.
There it is. Yuhan. So, with Wuhan and Yuhan especially, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. I've heard people say Wuhan. I've heard people say Wuhan. I've heard people say Yuan. I've heard people say Yuhan. I've heard people say Yihan. And so I think the W is usually in there though. But yeah, there is a little bit of variance, and those we standardize Tlingit just to say, well, we're not going to write. And this is okay. If you're teaching Tlingit, I would suggest standardize it. If you're including dialects, which is a great idea, do that for particular nouns, right? Like, oh, this is Utkhashtitif, but if you're from Yakutat, you might say Keshtif, right? And, you know, certainly include dialects, but then we kind of standardize the way we're writing them and teaching them. But if you're writing down somebody's speech or story, I would probably try and write it accurate to the way they're saying. But I don't always do that either, so I don't know. Okay. Them, singular them. Or he, or she, or they.
Do.
Not do.
Huh.
Yes. Huh. Okay, so do that means it's theirs. Do ani. Right there needs to be some other noun there. Do tla. Do in. But you can't just say do. Although Facebook tries that to because you know do ani kau denu is my Facebook name. So it's like, hey, do. It's like, that's incomplete. I'm sorry.
Ut. A high tone T.
Well, ut is coming for it. Ut is, it's something. What is this one?
With a high tone to A with a high tone on.
That's very close. But you gotta change one thing.
When A has a tilde.
This is not used very often. This is a non-human third person. That thing. Maybe a dog, especially if it's not your dog. That's okay. Well, if you love that dog, it'll still be a huh. It's up to you. Okay. Them all.
Us.
Yeah, well. With a high tone. Hus. How about someone? The fourth person human.
Ka.
Yeah, well. So this is an instance where Tlingit, as a language, does have some gender leaning. Ka can also be a man, and ka can be someone. But I think this is very similar to English, where you could say like from the dawn of man. But you're talking about like humans, but it's also just a weird thing to say these days. I don't know. It's a terrible way to start an essay, just in case you ever wonder it. What about something? I heard it earlier.
It would be the same as it.
No.
Ut.
Yeah, or what? At. So, and something is very powerful in Tlingit. It's a very powerful pronoun in all of its forms. Sometimes it does some kind of little job. Like says, I'm just locking up the object spot, right? Atwacha, I ate something. But sometimes it has particular meaning. So you say, it's in all of those clan names. Tlukach adi, right? Well, not all of them, it's in a bunch of them. It's in a whole bunch of other, like it's all over the place. It's all over. You're going to find it all over the place. Shayet, it's in there. Dakate, it's in there, right? Okay. That's all of them. Good job. Well, there's maybe a couple others. What about the relational or possessive form? No high tones whatsoever, ever at all.
Ugh.
Yeah, oh, our?
Ha.
Ha. Yeah, oh, your?
Eh.
Eh. Y'all's is. You all's. Uses.
E.
Ye. A singular person there. His, her, there.
Do.
There's the d. It's.
Us.
Ah. Yes. Ah. So this is all over the place in the Orange Dictionary, right? And when you say, this is used a lot. We're running into this, like if it starts to get complicated, sometimes it'll switch to So you might say, yak, a dot, right? So it says that boat, around it. So this one is used, so, oh, we'll get to that, okay. Them alls is, all of theirs is, how we want to do that.
Has to.
Yeah, well, has to. Someone's.
Ka.
Low tone. Something's.
At.
Low tone. Yeah, well. So, how would I translate achji?
My hand.
Well, it would be achjin. It's
My
very
possession.
my possession. What about haji?
Our possession.
Ji. Yi ji.
You all's possession.
Do ji. Their possession. A ji.
Its possession.
Has to ji.
All of their possession.
Ka ji.
Someone's possession.
Someone. Yeah, or a person. You can also say a person's possession.
Could be the people's possession.
Yeah. Kajiqayati. It's enough for the people. Atji. Atji sounds weird, but I do think you could say it.
Something's possession.
Yes. So how would I say, for example, we'll say siu dakusatan. So how would you say it's raining on me?
Ka.
Dude.
Ka siu dakusatan. How would you say it's sun shining on us?
Like sun shining, not like the sunbeams are hitting me.
It's sun shining on us. Audigan.
Ka.
Haka. Tsuhakakewa. Right? So the thing to remember with all of these relational pronouns, like this is how you link every single like a relational term, right? And this is different than English. On me. You're technically saying my on, my around, our on, our under, right? And you just have to get used to that relationship so that you're using the right pronoun. It's a good thing to review. Oh, object pronouns, how fun. Me. As an object pronoun. Say it if you're tired.
Low tone hut.
Us. As an object pronoun. You.
E.
It could be E. I've heard people say E. Y'all.
Yi.
Ye.
Ye.
Jinx.
Singular. Them. Well, it's a little yes and
And nothing.
Empty.
yes. When is it nothing and when is it
If there's a subject and an object.
If there's a third person subject and a third person object, it's all other times it's unmarked. Them all.
Us.
Hus plus 0 or Follow the same rule as the other one, but then you add hus on the outside of the verb. Someone. There's 2 ways to say it.
Claw or claw.
Yeah, away. Claw or something. Oh. What's that one mean?
Is it
Ut?
It is at, yes.
At.
To each other.
Whoosh.
Whoosh or wooch. To the self. Chush
Just-
or most commonly just the sh. Yeah, one. Good. There's all the object pronouns except for
Now what's the difference between whoosh and wooch again?
you would use whoosh most commonly if the next sound is a consonant. You would use wooch most commonly if the next sound is a vowel. Whoosh tin, whooch een. Whoosh consonant, whooch vowel. I do hear speakers say whoosh een. I hear it, but I think it's most commonly following that rule.
Does in the reflexive object pronoun, does sometimes the H get dropped and it's just an S?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But the hus can contract to the letter S.
Okay, it's hus that can.
If there's a vowel before it. So then sometimes you might say adeswu at. And that gets a little tricky. You gotta learn how to. But if you have high fluency speakers, they contract that a lot if the previous sound is a vowel. Good questions. Okay. So now, let's put those ones in action. Someone tell me how I'd say, I'm good.
Okay.
You're good. Okay. They are good or it is good.
Hey,
Okay. We're good. Oh, no one wants to say it? Gee.
Are you
Are you
okay?
okay?
Okay. Yeah. We're just too humble.
Jinx.
We're too humble to
Yeah.
say it. Y'all are good.
Yiyake.
Okay. They all are good.
Hastuyake.
No do.
Oh, has.
Hasyake, right? So just again, like this is it's very common. It's very common. I hear this. They'll say, "Has to you do a sock" or something like that, and it's just very common. It's just keeping these lists from bleeding into each other, which is tricky. People are good.
Koyaki.
You could say that, but I would probably switch to the longer version because that's usually used for weather.
Kayaki.
Kayak.
Yeah, way. So it's usually k. Here's what I think. This is from the book of suggestions. I would say it's k unless there's a weather verb about it already.
Mm-hmm.
And you switch it to ka. Because koyake is technically correct. But anybody you said that to, they'd probably look outside and say, okay, you say so. Or maybe they'll agree with you. Okay, so this blue means there's an object there. It means this is the list we're going to pick from, right? So we've got them all right here. Chet, ha, I, yi. In this case, they'll all be zeros, has and zero, ka or k, at. You can use whoosh, I don't think, for this one because you need a subject. Okay, so we did them all. Object L classifier chun. I'm smelly. Khatle chun. Yeah, oh, you stink. You're smelly. Khatle chun. They stink. They are smelly. It is smelly.
Lishan.
Khatle chun. We stink.
Ashichan.
Khatle chun. Y'all stink.
Yishuchan.
Yisha chun. They all stink.
Aslechan.
Asla chun. People are smelly.
Kashachan.
I'm probably going to say kushichan in this case because there's no stinky weather. So
But what about when you drive past the dump? Just it's smelly, or is it? I mean, it's always smelly over there.
oh yeah, well so
Would that count?
you could say chachanuch, but that doesn't have to. It's not coming from the sky. That's people making it that way.
Acid rain is really smelly.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's certain rain conditions or wind conditions that make, like living in a big city like New York City.
Right, right. That is true. And I was in San Francisco and it rained fish, but that's probably not going to happen very often. But I think you could still say shach dakusatan. Okay. Oh, was there another question?
What about if there's smoke, like from a forest fire?
Oh, to say like it's smoky?
Right. The smoke is smelly. Is that what you're asking, Dashacha?
Yeah, I mean the smoke would be smelly, but I guess it's not coming from the weather itself. Okay.
Yeah, so like it's cloudy, so like really having to do with weather. And so like weather phenomena, and not all of them like siudakusatan, it doesn't have the k on there. So really you got kushakus, kudikwas, kuwake, wasakuati, kuwata, kusiat. So there's still just a limited number of them. And so, but that's nice because then we know k will be the fourth person human pronoun a lot of the time. So when we go down to, so to be smoky would do with ek. Both of these would be short vowels. Neil, and then Neil Yi, I would write as 2 words. Neil Yi would do with S'eek. It is smoky in the house. Shtekhatyech would do with S'eek. It's smoky everywhere, which could be the case in some areas. Right?
Gunday would do with S'eek.
Well, Gande, in that case, Gande would be going outside. So you're saying the smoke is going outside. But you could say Gang would do with S'eek. It's smoky outside. Okay. Or you say Gande, Achtuasagu Gande Chwagudi. And then you could say,
No, I want the smoke to go outside.
oh, okay.
That's what I was
Achtuasagu Gande Wuhayi. It's air. And so in this case, the smoky part is not, you're not going to use the smoky verb. You're going to talk about the smoke as a noun.
No.
I want it to go outside. So wuha would just be like, it goes out. Okay. Good questions. So looking at this verb theme, there's what this verb theme tells us a lot. And it allows us to be able to predict what this is going to be. And some of you might already know it, so don't just go by memory. Like looking at this, there's some things it's going to tell you. What is the verb theme going to tell us?
That we really want me, not I.
Yes, it's going to be me. So it's going to be khat. Do we know what's going to come next, though? I mean, some of us, we've memorized this from beginning Lingít.
Right.
So I just looked at this. That's it. That tells me a lot.
It's going to be in the perfective.
Yes, because there is no...
Because it's happened already.
Yes.
And it's an event.
So if it's event and it is that way, we should expect w and di. I am wet.
Would
W, di. This tells us since it's perfective. This tells us something. This 0 tells us what this is going to be. 0 conjugation perfective closed is going to be what?
Short and high.
Yeah, wet. So I'm wet is going to be khatputitlak. All of that information is shown to us. Like we continue to practice how to read that. So we look at that, we say, okay, I'm looking at my eye, like when I look at a verb theme, if I'm trying to learn a verb, I'm like looking, is there a subject? No. Object? Yes, okay. There's the classifier. It's going to be di or da. Ak. But it's a 0 event, so I know it's going to be perfective, and it's going to be short and high.
And Renee, you don't use that squiggly thing to show if it's variable or not?
I don't. And so almost every single verb stem is variable. So Eggleston uses this to mark that the stem changes. But as we sort of looked at things, and I was talking with Zeus and with Seth Cable, we were saying, well, they almost all do. Why don't we mark the ones that don't? And so the only other thing to think of is if it's marked high, it does not go low. So there is no because it's too hard to do. You're wet.
It would it up.
But the w has to contract. I, w, di. That w has to contract.
Ew.
Iwdetuk. And if you're living in the interior, you might say it a little different because you have vowel W, consonant, vowel, stem. That's the magic combination. That's gonna imdetuk, iwdetuk.
Is the umlaut YU going to always be a W?
Unless it's a second person subject or second person plural subject. So yes.
Okay, unless.
That's the only thing that will change it. Because when it runs into an I sound, I or Y, it says, okay, I'll be a Y.
Doctor?
It are what or it is what.
Woodetuk.
Yeah, or what? Woodetuk. We're wet. There has to be contraction here.
Howdetuk.
Yeah, or what? And if you're from the interior,
Detuk.
howdetuk, humdetuk. Y'all are wet. Another vowel ending.
Yudecluk.
Or
Yumdecluk. Cluck.
Udetuk, Yimdetuk. They all are wet.
Do.
Now do.
Huswoodetuk.
Get a wet. Huswoodetuk.
It's a zero in front, not a.
Yes, because there's no subject. If there's no subject, it can't push the third person to be A. So the third person is, for a third person object, it's 0. A third person subject will push it to A. It'll push it to change. People are wet.
Howdetuk.
I would, well, I think I'll probably use P here. Or
Is
Kumdetuk. You could say Kawdetuk. Well, if you said it, you'd say Kawdetuk. I don't think a speaker would say that. Like a high fluency speaker. I think it's just that's the natural form. And it pushes to ka if it has to.
And it's long because W's open.
When k meets the perfective, it becomes ku. Right? So just like kudziti or ku shiguz. Okay. Can we do one more in 2 minutes? It says a thematic prefix. What's going on? Everything is told to us here. Again, it's another event verb. Uh-oh. What's got to happen?
It's going to be short, huh?
Yes, because it will be in the...
Perfective.
So it's going to be perfective. So it's going to be sick. And we got an object. There's no subject there. So when we
Sick.
have ya, What's the classifier going to be? It's a zero classifier, but for positive perfective,
Yeah.
it's got to go yeah. So ya sick gets you
Yawa.
yawa sick. I'm weathered in.
That yawa sick.
Yawa sick. You're weathered in.
Iyawasik.
Yawa sick. They are weathered in. Singular they.
Yawa sick.
Yawa sick. We're weathered in.
Ha yawa sick.
Yawa sick. Y'all are weathered in.
Ye yawa.
Yawas.
Oh, that was almost synchronous. Ye yawa sick. They all are weathered in. There's no hasdu.
Us yawa sick.
Yawa sick. People are weathered in. We're going to take the short form.
Oh yawa sick.
Yawa sick. Yawa. Hasdu ka siu daku satan. Aka awe haswudik. Ya yidit ko has yawa sick. Okay. Thoughts or questions?
I think I'm just gonna need to go over it a few times.
Yeah, we got more. We got more. There's a whole bunch of. We haven't even gotten to the subject verbs yet. We still got probably like 10 more verbs to go, maybe 4 or 5. But just like really the pattern that we're learning here is practicing the object, changing that object. That's all. That's what we did here. Then we'll change the subject. Then we'll look at building perfectives. Then we'll look at building futures. Then we'll look at building other things. But we got to talk about Monday. What are we talking about on Monday?
Children. And my question is going to be, what is that child doing? Which I will work with Renee to make sure we have it, and I'll put it on the Google Doc before that. So you don't have to take that question wherever you want to go. Whether it's your own child, somebody else's child, a child in public, a child at S'eek, a child on a TV show, but the question we're going to ask each other is what is that child doing? Have fun with it.
Be creative.
Children are wonderful and weird. You can come up with a lot of answers.
We also, I just want to make sure that we know this verb. So, dléigu would be shake my hand. Because I know take my hand was brought up earlier, but dléigu is something that's probably not being used that much anymore. But it's just like shake my hand.
What about
Hyundai.
Short. Give me your hand.
But
It's more like bring your hand here.
But that could work then, like when you're trying to like hand people something, you want them to give you a surprise, like close your eyes and hold out your hands. Or give me your hand.
Okay. If you're saying give me a hand, you're saying help me, right? So if you're saying, I wouldn't want people to slang that into Lingít. Achite Dísi. On. Help me with that.
Not helping, like putting something into somebody's hand.
Oh.
Close your eyes and give me your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like that.
okay.
You're like giving them a surprise or like a little gift. Hopefully it wasn't a surprise.
Yeah, okay. So how do you say close your eyes?
Walk. Got that part.
It has its own verb. So we should probably, let's make sure we got that.
Says chat yisaten.
Well, that would be, don't look at me. You say tesh. What tesh? You'd say sheshat istinek. Don't look at me. But that's just saying that could come off as a little harsh.
My grandma used to yell that at my uncle's dog all the time.
So this is something that's I think is wild is that Tlingit has its own verb. So you'd say ki de tluch or ki de tluch, ki de tluch. Close your eyes. And when teachers were using this with children, they kept saying iwak ki de tluch. But then the elder in the room said, you don't have to say your walk because it's already in it's even though there's no I in there at all. This is the verb that means to close your eyes. So you'd say ki de tluk kahandi ichin. I think that would work.
Nice.
Okay.
Renee, could you go up to dléigu for a sec, just again? Because I was looking at the theme, and it doesn't actually mean shake. Okay. Oh, it does. Oh, it's the other one up top that is different. Oh, the gin. Okay, yeah.
So
Okay.
dléigu on its own means to,
Yeah.
like especially patting a baby. So it means to pat something lovingly.
Yeah. Okay.
Pat on the back, or like someone might pat a chin or cheek or something.
Yeah.
But that's what they're called. Dléigu is because you would pat the baby and sing a little song. And they're called dléigu is a lullaby. They're also called dlékwashi. But for some reason, when you say "do that to my hand," it becomes "shake my hand." Loving, but it would be kind of socially awkward if you said "achchin nachleku" and someone patted your hand.
But why I noticed it was because a lot of those old people have real soft handshakes, eh? Like they don't it's not that grabbing your hand and shaking it like that, eh?
Yeah, like the squeeze contests that some people.
I often have female elders, instead of shaking my hand if I'm leaving, just tap my hand very lovingly on the back.
Or like something's going on, they're like,
Yeah, right. You could like someone's hand.
If it's just one tap, it means I'm not paying attention.
Okay. All right, good stuff. Gonna cheesh plain. Kijk gaan. Je wish to see.
Sheesh.
Sheesh. Jogging.
Cheese.
Fish.